Welcome to GENIX-JS, a YouTube channel dedicated to teaching you all you need to know to get started with front-end web development. In our last video, we concluded by building this basic HTML form, by building this contact form, and in this video we're going to continue from where we stopped by styling it up. Let's get started. So now, before we start styling, we need to add some identifiers such as classes and IDs that will make our styling easier, so we don't have to start replicating styles. And in our last video, we spoke about identifiers such as class and IDs, and even the element selector. We are going to be discussing more, such as the standard selectors and some CSS properties such as layouts, such as the flex box, and such as some other basic CSS properties as well. So now let's start by giving them different classes. So we're going to give this one a class of, let's give its name field set, right? Or in general, let's just give field set. We don't want the field sets to, let's look at our code here, our web page. Let's put this to the right so it's easy for us. So we don't want the field sets to be having this border, so we'll use CSS to remove that border, but we need to select it. So we just give, and a class is used for selecting a different list of elements. So now we can say class field set, we'll give it the same name. Remember, ID is only used for one element. So now we'll give this field set class field set as well, field set, right? And that's all, since that's only the three that have the field set class. And then we can also give the legend also. So we have class. So now this legend, we are going to give it a class and an ID for specific legend elements. So what do I mean? I'm going to give this a legend class of name legend, or name legend rather. Yeah, name legend, right? And then I'll just copy this and paste it in the remaining legends proportional to their names. So to copy, right click and then click on copy, and then come into this legend and then right click and then paste. And then we're going to type query type legend, since it's for this query type, right? So just stay with me. So now in this place, same thing here, we're going to right click and then paste, and then give this message legend, right? Message legend, right? So now the ID, okay, we're going to change it now, ID, because it's specific to just this. And then ID, sorry about that, ID, since it's just for that particular legend, but the class is going to be legend, right? We'll give it legend to style each and every one of them proportionally. And then we have class legend. So why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I want to be able to select all the legend elements at the same time, and also select a specific legend. That's why I added ID and I added classes. So legend class will be used to select everyone at the same time, why ID is going to be used to select just one of it, just one from each. So now the next thing we're going to do now is to add, let's finish adding the elements. Let's finish adding each and every one of them. So now we have class, and then inside this class we can put label, and then inside here we can put impute, right? Yeah, impute. Inside here, same thing, class label, class imputes. So you might ask, but we can select it according to the element. Yes, but it's best you just use the selectors, so you can select everything and know that even if you create an extra one, you don't have to start selecting everything at once. You don't have to start creating extra elements to select everything at once. So we have class. So let's give this a class of impute. Let's give this a class of label. Let's give this a class of impute. So now you can give this a class of input, right? And can give this a class of label. So now that we've added class and IDs, basic class and IDs to all our elements, the last one now is this. You can give it a class of submit button, right? It's the only button, but let's just give it a class of submit button, right? Or an ID, just specify that it's the only button on the whole page. So that's that about that. The next thing now is to start styling our CSS. So I'm just going to increase this and then split our screen, and then we have HTML on the left and CSS on the right. So we're going to start with our wrapper, and then our wrapper has an ID of wrapper, right? So to select IDs, remember it's wrapper. So now this is going to be a whole lot of tabbing and switching between pages, but let's just do it. So this is our, let's move it like this and zoom in. All right, so now in our wrapper, remember I said the wrapper is basically the whole stuff that wraps all the whole form and the card itself. So the wrapper has, the first thing is the wrapper has a background color of light green, right? So let's add that in. We're going to be fine-tuning a lot of styles as we go on, but this is just so you can understand how to style in CSS. So this background light green, and then if you go to our, I just saved it, if you go to our this thing, you can see that the background of light green, but are not quite what we want. So now in order for us to get what we want, there's a property known as this. So basically what this does is it selects everything. So this is a universal selector, and a universal selector simply means it's every single thing inside here that will be selected. So in order for us to select everything, we use this asterisk, and then when we use it, I'm going to say margin 0, padding 0. So basically that removes all the spacing that we have. According to the last video, we spoke about margins and paddings. Removes all the spacing that we have, right? So now that we've removed all the spacing that we have, what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be adding another property known as box sizing. So now box sizing, basically we have different types. We have border box and we have context box. Now if you read this, it says box sizing specifies the behavior of the width and height properties. So basically when we say border box, simply means we're including the width and the height of the properties, but when we say context box, then it's basically the width and the height of the contents that we're including. I know this might not be understood easily, but might not be understood first travel. It basically adds a little difference to our web page. So now the next thing we're going to be doing is, now that we've selected our universal selector, we've selected everything, let's now give this an height, right, of 100%, 100 viewport width, viewport height. So now look at it, 100 viewport height. This gives us the full height, or the full height of our viewport. So a viewport is basically the screen size, basically the screen size based on the device. So we have a mobile phone device, we have the laptop device. So the viewport, if it's 100, is going to give us the full screen size of that particular device, right? So now let's just continue. So now that we already have our viewport height to be this, let's style the input element first, and then we can come back to this body. So now we're going to select our contact. Let's minimize this. Yeah, we're going to select our contact form header, and it's an ID. This is it, contact form header, heading. Let's change to header. So now to select that, we're just going to type contact form header. So the first thing that you can see in this contact form header is that it has a color of, color is not black per se, but you can just add it. You can just say color, let's give it black. Even if it's black by default, let's still give it black. And then now that we're giving it black, we can give it opacity. So opacity basically reduces how sharp the color of an element is. So we'll give it 0.8, right? 0.8. So if we come back to this, you should see that it has reduced a little, similar to how it looks here, right? So now that I've given it opacity, you can see now the spacing between these two is quite much, a little. So we're going to add it margin top. Remember, spacing between two elements is margin. So margin top. And our last video we spoke about units, so we can give it top. It's not that much, so we just give it 10 pixels. Margin bottom, can give it 10 pixels as well, right? So now we've created this basic layout of margin top and bottom, giving it 10 pixels on each. So now next thing we're going to be doing now is to create the input styles. So we're going to be selecting our form first, and this is where I'm going to be talking about flexbox. So flexbox, contact form. So basically flexbox is a display property that allows us to automatically define layouts, automatically define responsive layouts for our elements. So responsive layouts are layouts that on different screens they auto arrange themselves on different screens, such as your phone. You can have a nav bar that is spread out on a laptop, but when it's on a phone it becomes an hamburger menu that you can select. So that's responsiveness. Flexbox allows us to do that easily. So we're going to create display flex. I'm still going to make a video dedicated to teaching you flexbox specifically, so just stay tuned. But in this video, because of the sake of this, we're just going to use the basic properties from flexbox. So now we have flex, display of flex. If I click on save, something funny is going to happen to our layout. Now you can see this, something very funny. You can see now this is horizontal, it's meant to be vertical like how it looks in the design. Alright, so we can see something very funny about our web page. It is horizontal. So this is what flex does for us. Flex basically allows us, by default, it groups our elements on horizontal mode. So the reason why we have horizontal is because everything is inside this form directly. If we add divs, then it is actually not going to be horizontal. So what do I mean? Let's change this a little to look more like this, right? Alright, so in flexbox we have different properties such as justify content, align items, align contents, and all, but we're just going to be using a few, and then in the video I'll be making regarding flex, we'll talk about it in depth. So now in order for us to achieve this layout, right, it's vertical, not horizontal. So we have a property known as justify content. So justify content, basically what justify content does is, by default, our flex direction, if you look at it very well now, our flex direction, you can see that it's horizontal. So flex direction by default is row, right? But we want it to be vertical. So opposite of row is what? Colon. So if we save, you see that it changes immediately, right? It changes immediately to colon, right? Because that's our flex direction. That is the same thing with our design here. That's the same thing with our design here, colon, right? So we're getting somewhere. So let's just continue. So now that we have colon, we can give it justify content of, let's give it a little bit of, okay, we don't need justify content since everything is already in colon, right? We don't need justify content. So that's just, those are the only two properties that we need in our flex box for today. So now let's continue. So we have our field. So this field, now let's look at our image. Consider this image, they are grouped away from each other, but they are inside, they look like they are inside the same place. They look that they're inside the same, they are grouped together. And then we already have a field set here, right? So now the reason why I gave it a class of field sets is so we can select all the field sets, right? So we can select all the field sets. So in order for us to do this, we can say class field set. So let's just put a comment here and say styles for all the field sets, and then we'll be selecting each field set one by one according to the specific styles they have here. So now we don't want our field set to have this funny looking border around it. We don't want our filter to have this funny looking border around it, this border. So what we're going to do, we're going to remove it. I'm also going to hide this name for this particular name field sets here. Since we already have labels, we're going to hide the name so it can just show first name and last name. So what do I mean? So we're going to do border. Remember in our last video covering box model 0. So let's check that again. So now you see that the borders has been removed for each and every field set. If I comment this out, see that it's added. If I comment it away, see that it's removed. So that's the benefit of using class. You can style different elements with the same class name. So now the next thing, okay, this legend, right? So the next thing we're going to do now is, so the way I'm creating comments, in the last video I said control and / or you type it directly. So I say legend styles. So now look at this legend. We don't need this name because we already have first name and last name according to our design. We already have first name and last name according to our design. So I'm going to be saying legend. So now, since everything already has legend, it's just the name legend. This is why I created the ID. You see the usefulness. So now we're going to say ID, the legend ID, right? Name legend, right? Rather, name legend. So in order for us to start our name legend, remember it's ID hashtag, and then this, in this name legend, we're going to give it a display of none. We don't want it to show at all, right? So now if you go back, we've saved. We don't want it to show at all. So we've saved. If you come here, you can see that there's no more name again. If you comment it out, there's name. You see, there's no more name again, right? So now the next step, you see how we're creating it sequentially. The next step is to group our inputs together so they can look like this. So they can look like this, right? So that's the next step. So now flex can also be used for this. And if you look at it very well, we don't have them grouped inside here. We don't have them grouped inside here. So this is where divs come in handy. This is where divs come in handy. So you can just say div, and then we can cut this. Ctrl X, and then since it's wrapping the two together, you can paste it. Ctrl V, and then that's about that. So I'll just tab this in, tab in, tab this in, tab this in, tab this in. All right, so we have them together. So you can see that they are, that just solves everything. Putting them inside this container, you don't even need to use flexbox. That just solves everything for you. So now what am I going to be doing next? If you look at it very well, we have this in our design. For each and every one of them, we have the name, and then we have the input, the name input, name input, name input. But this one is different because this is a field set, this is also a field set, but name input, name input. So in order for us to do this, you can wrap the label around. You can put the input inside the label, although that's not good practice, but it's best to just create an extra, let's say div, right? So now you see why we're using div to wrap up content, right? And this content is inside a form. We already have a field set, so it's still semantic because on the outer part we know what we are dealing with before we enter into the inner part. So we can give this a class. Since it's going to be used for multiple elements, we can give it field group, right? Field group. So we have field sets. Okay, no, yeah, field group, or input group, since we already have field set. So that's the class input group. You can cut this, Ctrl X, and put it inside input group. All right, put it inside input group, and then we can create input group again. Give it a class of input group. All right, let me just save this and cancel it so that you can see this clearly. All right, so now inside here we can cut this. So we just highlight all this, Ctrl X, and then Ctrl V to paste it. So there you go. All right, so that also solves everything. So now the next thing that we're going to do now is to actually make it look like this, that one appears over the other. So how are we going to do that? You can see that it has everything. Now we need flexbox, right? Why do we need flexbox? We need flexbox because this is inside, this is no longer separate, it is now inside a div. So now let's open our CSS, right? So we have legend styles. We can create another one. We can call it input group styles. So now we select the class of input group and then give it a display of flex, right? Give it a display of flex. So no difference yet, but then before we come to the input group, we have this, and then we'll call this name inputs or name inputs group. So I know this is sounding funny, but we can give it an ID, name inputs group containing this one. Then we have inputs group and another inputs group, right? So name inputs group, we're just going to copy this, Control C, and then it's an ID, it's meant to be before this. So hashtag name inputs group, and then give it a display of flex. That's all. So it's back to the normal way it was. I know that was a lot, but you can see that everything is looking the same already. So we can give this now a flex direction of colon, the inputs group itself, flex direction colon. So the reason why we've done this now is just so it can look like this. You see, just so it can look like this. So everything is coming into shape for the inputs group. So you can see it looks like that, but it's not taking the full width. So in order for us to make it take the full width, what are we going to do? We're going to give the inputs group a width of 100%. Okay, that didn't work out. So let's just cancel this. Let's give it the justify content. So now justify content basically has different property values. So the property values are space between, space around. So if it's space between, there will be a space between the input groups. Okay, so now we already have it to look like this, how it is in the design, just the way we want it to be in the design. You can see we have it to look like this, just the way we want it to be in the design. So now let's go to the next, which is this. We have it to look like this. So let's go to the next. So we'll split again, yeah, and then we can increase this. All right, so now we have this. The next thing is the email. So the email does not need any styling. Right? It does not. But the only thing we're going to add is that asterisk, that little asterisk that you see there. This little asterisk. If you zoom in, you see it. This little asterisk that you see here. So now in order for us to do it, we can just space for asterisk. So that asterisk simply means it is required. That form is required for you to fill it up. You can't escape it. That's basically what they're trying to say. You can't submit without filling it. So now we have query type, and then is the message required? Yeah, message is required as well. So we have message, you can space it, and then that's all. So consider everything has been grouped. So now the next thing we're going to be doing now is to style up our radio button the way it should look, like. So now, so the radio button, look at it very well. The radio button, if you look at it very well, this is how it looks. So we have it inside a border. We have this one also inside a border, right? So in order for us to do that, we're just going to select them at once. So this email does not, this email also, we can put this email also inside the inputs group rather, yeah, so it can have that flex property, and then we'll give it a class of inputs group, and by default we don't need to style it again. If you save, it just takes up the same display property as the rest. You can see just takes up the same display property as the rest. So now let's go back to the radio button. So the radio button, we have query. The radio button, we have this query type, and then this is inside the border. So in order for us to select it, we also need to give this, put this inside a container, and put this other radio button also inside the container, so that we can style them together, the label and the inputs, right? So that's just it. So now in order for us to do, we can give it a name of radio group. That one was input group, right? Well, we can give this one a radio group just for the radio buttons alone. Radio group. Alright, so we already have that. So now in order for us to create radio group, we can say radio group styles. Radio group styles, and then inside radio group styles, we want it to appear this way, the way it is in the design. We want it to appear this way, that it has a border, that each of them, they have a border. So the first thing we're going to do now inside that radio group styles is actually to create radio group style, radio group, and then give it a border. And remember in the last video we spoke about border box model. We have 1 pixel solid. Let's give it black for now. Now you can see that we already have solid black, right? We have solid black, but it's not looking how we want. It's not looking the way we want it to look. It's not looking the way we want it to look like. Why? Because they are proportional to each other. They're proportional to each other. So basically they are proportional to each other. These are supposed to look like, it's supposed to be spaced like how this one is spaced. So we have to wrap it again inside another. So the reason I'm using divs is so you can just wrap up your elements. There are easier ways to do this, but for a start, let's wrap this. So now we just wrap this together, and then we can give it a class of query radio group. So now you see we gave it radio group, query radio group, right? So now we can put that query radio group first before. Okay, it's meant to be an ID, just like, so we can have consistent styling. We have name inputs group, query radio group, right? Query radio group. So we'll change this to ID, so it can match this query radio group, and I'll give it flex. Display flex, right? Display flex. So now there's a special way to actually style things like this. We're dealing with the contact form alone, so we can actually group in selectors. We can group selectors. So to group selectors that have the same style. So what do I mean? You don't need to replicate a style that is similar styles. You don't need to replicate them. So you can just copy and paste that here. So that's, you can say radio and input and radio group styles. So you can cancel this since they have both the same display flex. So these selectors, you can now put query input group, query radio group. So they both have the same thing, the same style. Look at it here, see that it has taken shape the way we want, same thing as the input, same thing as the query. And then this does not really need to be styled yet. The next thing we need to focus on now is this checkbox and then the button, and then we can call it a wrap. So looking at it now, our checkbox is not grouped. So in order for us to do it, we can create this, and then we can put a class and give it checkbox group, or checkbox group, checkbox group. So now this checkbox group, you see that it already how we want it to be. We don't need to style it again. It's already the way we want it to be, according to how the design is. According to how the design is, we don't need it to be any how like the other ones. So the last thing we'll be doing in this video, so we don't need to create any more styles. This is just basic styles for this video. So the last thing we'll be doing is just style our button. So our button has the ID of submit button, right? So ID submit button, and then we give it background color of green. Look at it very well. It's having background color of green, right? And also this, we'll add the asterisk for this checkbox, but let's just give it background color of green. And after that, we can give it color, text color of white. So if we check our web page, you can see that is looking not the same, but then we have a basic structure that we can use and iterate on. So that's all about this video. So in the next video, we're going to continue styling everything to formatting the input elements to look like how it looks like here. So thank you for staying tuned and subscribe to my next video. The link to the code for this video is in the description below, so do well to download it. I'll leave GitHub link for those of us that know how to use GitHub, and I'll leave the link, the Google Drive link, for those of us that are not familiar with GitHub but just want to download the code directly. Thank you very much for staying tuned. Subscribe and leave a like. See you in the next video.